Good evening, everyone. Bonsoir. Thank you for joining us. My name is Catherine Spencer-Ross, and I'm president of Heritage Ottawa and chair of its lecture series committee. I'm delighted to welcome you to our celebration of Heritage Week, which Heritage Ottawa marks with its annual Phillips Memorial Lecture. Before I continue, I'd like to acknowledge that Ottawa is at the heart of a vast homeland whose history reaches back long before the development of the National Capital Region as we now know it. For hundreds of years, Algonquin Anishinaabe peoples have been pressing for their Indigenous rights to be respected and their history to be understood. Heritage Ottawa makes efforts through our programs and partnerships to bring awareness to Algonquin history and heritage with events and programming. This lecture is made possible thanks to the generous support of our leadership sponsors, Sandy Smallwood and Andrex Holdings, and Merkley Supply Limited. We are also grateful for grants from the City of Ottawa and the Province of Ontario. I'd also like to thank our members and donors. Your support is vital to our sustainability as an organization and allows us to present programming such as this free lecture and to advocate for the preservation of our heritage resources, a theme we will address this evening. If you would like to join Heritage Ottawa or make a financial contribution, I encourage you to visit our website at heritageottawa.org for details. I mentioned at the beginning that this is the Phillips Memorial event. This annual presentation was inaugurated by Heritage Ottawa 20 years ago and is dedicated to the founders of the organization that is now Heritage Ottawa. In 1967, during Canada's centenary, Bob and Marianne Phillips created an advocacy group called A Capital for Canadians. Its Heritage Committee was the beginning of Heritage Ottawa, which was incorporated in 1974. Bob Phillips was its first president. In those early years, with tremendous personal commitment, Bob and Marianne undertook information campaigns and public activism to save key yet threatened historic buildings and structures in Ottawa, structures as diverse as the Billings House, Union Station, East Block on Parliament Hill, and the Rideau Chapel Convent, all of which were saved. I think we can say without exaggeration that Bob and Marianne Phillips, whose photos you see on the screen, were the founders of built heritage consciousness and advocacy in Ottawa. Their daughters joined us online. Once again, it is a great pleasure to have you here for this annual lecture that celebrates your parents and honors the strength of heritage awareness in Ottawa and the National Capital Region, to which Bob and Marianne devoted so much time, energy, and effort. Thank you for being with us this evening. As you know, in 2026, Ottawa is marking the bicentennial of the city, which has evolved in this place over the last 200 years. Throughout the year, Heritage Ottawa will highlight different aspects of the city's growth, from early Bytown to the present, through the examination of buildings and landscapes. Today, I'm delighted to introduce you to a new weekly initiative called Bicentennial Bites, Capsule du Bicentenaire en français, which you will find on various social media platforms. A new bite will appear each week this year. Please watch our website for lectures, walking tours, and other events that will mark Ottawa's first 200 years. Tonight's lecture represents several touchstones. It is part of our bicentennial celebration. It focuses on a very contemporary issue that Ottawa faces as it advocates for the preservation of heritage assets at risk. Bob and Marianne's daughter, Margaret, indicated in an email to me that her parents would enthusiastically have approved of the topic of demolition by neglect, an issue that affects both urban and rural heritage assets. Taking the words of another of Bob and Marianne's daughters, Bridget, herself a former Heritage Ottawa board member, this is also a tribute to the late David Fleming, recognized for his huge commitment to heritage advocacy and his longtime targeting of demolition by neglect. Not to mention his foundational role in establishing this event, the Bob and Marianne Phillips Memorial Lecture. Demolition by neglect is perhaps having its moment, none too soon. Heritage Ottawa was pleased most recently to see that the issue received attention in the press with a double-page spread in the Ottawa Citizen last week, followed by related letters to the editor. At the end of this evening's presentation, our speakers have agreed to respond to questions. Jay Baltz, former Heritage Ottawa board member and current member of our advocacy committee, will moderate the questions. It is now my privilege to introduce our 4 speakers for this evening. With a Master's of Science in Planning from the University of Toronto, Lesley Collins has worked as a heritage planner since 2006. She joined the City of Ottawa as a heritage planner in 2009 and is now the program manager of the city's heritage planning branch. Lesley continues to work on complex files, including the challenges presented by Ontario's Bill 23, More Homes Built Faster. She's passionate about heritage conservation and is very concerned about the occurrence of demolition by neglect here in our city. Jack Hanna is a retired teacher with a passion for history. A longtime resident of Centretown, he has been deeply involved in the Centretown Community Association and currently serves as chair of its Heritage Committee. Jack actively champions heritage conservation in his community and helps raise awareness by leading walking tours and advocating for livable, well-designed development in the neighborhood. Heather Mitchell is a retired public servant and film and television actor working under the name Heather Todd Mitchell. A resident of Westboro for over 25 years, she served on the board of the Island Park Community Association and is currently vice chair of the Heritage and Outreach Committee of the Westboro Community Association. Heather is drawn to the subject of this evening's lecture through her concern for the systematic destruction of Westboro's heritage buildings and a goal of seeing what remains conserved and repurposed. Our final speaker is Linda Hode. Linda is a long-standing member of the Board of Heritage Ottawa. She is also co-chair of its very effective advocacy committee, the activist arm of the organization. Through that committee, she is in contact with local community associations about the heritage challenges they face. A longtime resident of Hintonburg, Linda has been an active participant on its zoning committee. She's also a former member and chair of Ottawa's Committee of Adjustment. I'm delighted now to turn the floor over to Lesley, who will launch this evening's presentation on the very real issue of demolition by neglect.
Thank you, Catherine. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for that great introduction. As Catherine mentioned, my name is Lesley Collins. I'm the program manager at the City of Ottawa's Heritage Planning Branch within the Planning, Development and Building Services Department. So my role today on today's panel is to set the stage by explaining what demolition by neglect is, why it matters, what the city's doing about it, where we're being successful, where we're not. And then you're going to hear from the community perspective from my co-panelists. The issue affects many neighborhoods in Ottawa and is a risk to our heritage buildings and to neighborhood cohesion. So what is demolition by neglect? It refers to a situation where heritage properties are intentionally allowed to deteriorate to a point where demolition appears to be the only option. The intent is often strategic. On the owner's part, letting a building fall apart until it becomes easier and more financially viable to remove it rather than repair it. I will say that situation is, I think, the prime issue that we have in our city today and across the province, arguably. But there are certainly other issues whereby the cost associated with repair and rehabilitation of a heritage building is quite expensive and can be a challenge for existing property owners to maintain their properties. So there are kind of 2 streams of demolition by neglect. I think there's intentional neglect and then neglect based on inability to afford or coordinate the work required to maintain a historic building. So from a municipal perspective, this is one of the most challenging forms of loss for our heritage buildings. Sometimes it happens very slowly over time, and we don't know until it's too late. And so one of the city's goals and my kind of message for you today is that we are working very hard to try to prevent future instances of demolition by neglect, knowing that we have a number of buildings already that are in not great shape. So tonight I'm going to walk you through the tools we have, what's working, and the gaps we're trying to close. I'm going to stay away from specific case studies because I know my co-panelists who are coming up are going to talk from the community's perspective about some of the, I would say, poster children of this issue in Ottawa. So why is it a problem? When a designated heritage building deteriorates, we don't just lose the structure, we lose part of its cultural heritage value and the story that it told. High land values have created incentives for property owners to neglect buildings rather than maintain them, especially in areas under development pressure. And I think if you look at some of those quote unquote poster children, they are in areas where we are seeing a lot of development in the city, and the value of the land in some cases is higher than the value of the building. The impacts extend beyond the property line. Neighbors deal with blight, safety risks, declining streetscapes, and I think one big issue that I hear outside of the heritage community is the persistent public misconception that these buildings are run down because they're heritage. So they're run down. Once they become run down, they are forced to be kept because they're heritage, because the city won't allow them to be demolished. When we as the heritage community know that the heritage status isn't the issue, it's the owner's neglect that is causing this problem. So this isn't only Ottawa's problem. So although Ottawa receives a lot of attention for demolition by neglect, it's very much a national issue. So just a few sort of media clips. We have examples from Hamilton, Toronto, Niagara-on-the-Lake, Winnipeg, Galt, Vancouver, Calgary, and of course, the aforementioned article that Catherine mentioned about the city's heritage watch list. So in my work over the past decade, speaking with municipal colleagues across the province, it's clear that no municipality has found a perfect solution, including Ottawa, which we all know because we wouldn't be here talking about it if it was a solution, if we had solved the problem. But one thing I think is unique to Ottawa is the profile we've placed on this issue. And I think that comes both from the heritage advocacy community and it comes from city staff who are interested in this issue through our heritage watch list, which has become a very public tool that raises the visibility of these at-risk properties. I'm not aware of any other places in Ontario taking this kind of approach of a broad, a public list with a proactive approach across various departments. So for those of you who are unfamiliar, what is the Heritage Watch List? So the Heritage Watch List is our prime tool that we're using to monitor and try to combat this issue of demolition by neglect of the city. It was created in 2016 following the Mayor's Task Force on Heritage Matters, the former mayor, I should say, as a way to formally track vacant designated heritage buildings. Currently, we have 39 building properties on the list, including 9 of those properties that are foreign owned. Each listed property is photographed, posted online for transparency. You can see a little clip on this slide of the website. And the list helps us monitor risk and coordinate enforcement on the property. And we're trying to signal to the public that we are paying attention. One of the things I'll talk about a little later is some things we're thinking about and how to make this website even more transparent and provide more information to the public about it. So in terms of what special steps the city takes for properties on the list, the list is part of a coordinated kind of approach that we take where we have a team of people from my branch, so the Heritage Planning branch, bylaw and regulatory services who enforce the property standards bylaw, as well as building code services staff who enforce the Building Code Act. And we work together to address issues not just heritage issues, but also issues around safety, issues that maybe are on the interior of a building. And we take we have a collaborative approach whereby we visit each property twice a year as a group, and we look to coordinate enforcement and issue orders, etc. So in terms of applicable bylaws and enforcement tools, we talk about enforcement. It's not just one tool, it's a combination of things. So the 3 main pieces of legislation that we're using are the Ontario Heritage Act, the City's Property Standards Bylaw, and the Building Code Act. And each of these enables a different form of intervention, and our approach has to be coordinated across all of them in order to be successful. So the Ontario Heritage Act, we have designated properties. many people on this call are probably aware of what that means, but we have individually designated properties under Part 4 of the Heritage Act and heritage conservation districts under Part 5. The Heritage Act also gives us the ability to develop heritage-specific building standards, and this is for designated properties, so both in districts and individually designated. And that is the basis for the heritage sections of our property standards bylaw. We also have Section 69 of the Act, which provides our enforcement capabilities. This is more related to if an owner undertakes work without a heritage permit or removes or demolishes without a permit, that sort of thing. There are enforcement abilities. I will say enforcement under the Heritage Act is not the easiest thing to do. It has a very high administrative burden on the city, can be very time consuming, and doesn't always result in the best approach in terms of fines, etc. The second tool, and this is what we use the most, is our property standards bylaw, and it's really the basis of the Heritage Watch List. So under the Building Code Act, the city has the authority to establish minimum standards for buildings, including heritage buildings. And so that goes back to that section of the Heritage Act that I was just talking about. We have a property standards bylaw that applies citywide and covers all buildings in the city. It has specific sections related to things like residential properties, non-residential properties, vacant land, and then we have a whole section on heritage. And it gives us the practical mechanism to intervene when a building is deteriorating, whether that work is heritage related or not, and then it gives us additional standards for heritage work. So just to give you a sense from a heritage perspective, the section of the property standards bylaw specifically refers to the maintenance, protection, and preservation of heritage attributes of a building. So that's Part 4 or Part 5 of the Heritage Act. And we have additional standards. So that's for all designated properties. We have additional standards for vacant heritage buildings. So specifically, owners have to protect them from fire, storm, neglect, intentional damage. They have to include proper boarding, weatherproofing, and ongoing upkeep. So when we do our proactive inspections, these are the things we're looking for. We're looking to see, is this property compliant with the property standards bylaw? That's the primary tool we're using. And then the third piece is the Building Code Act. So the Building Code Act governs safety. It's about structural systems, fire protection, egress, etc. And while the act isn't specific to heritage, it gives us the authority to intervene when a building becomes unsafe to the public. And so when you have seen this around the city and in the media, particularly in demolition by neglect cases, and I think one example, a very high profile example, was McGee House on Wellington Street West in Hintonburg, whereby the building had been vacant, or actually it wasn't vacant, but the building, was not being well maintained, did not appear from the outside to be in extremely poor condition, but did suffer a catastrophic collapse. And our chief building official and our building code services staff had to intervene as it related to public safety and ensuring that people in the public right-of-way were safe and the people in the building or not in the building were safe. So what's working well? I'm trying to take I should have maybe flipped it around and talked about the challenges first, but I'm going to talk about the good and then the bad. So I think we're most successful when we take a coordinated approach. Trying to break down those silos within a bureaucracy can be a challenge. We have a really good system going right now. So we have a set of procedures that we're all following. We have a routine in terms of our inspections. We have a shared approach to how orders are being issued. Simple things. We have a shared team chat. So when somebody receives a complaint, we're able to just quickly talk about it. Those sorts of things are really beneficial. We're starting to use other tools like heritage easements and demolition agreements. You're going to hear Jack Hanna from the CCA, I think, talk about St. Mark's Church on Elgin Street. This is an example of one where we've used a heritage easement to assist us in the process. The city has recently undertaken some work on this property at the owner's cost, and we've been able to do it through the heritage easement agreement. We're looking to try to use tools like demolition agreements. So when an owner is granted permission to demolish, how do we limit the benefits that they gain from that demolition? We've been working on increasing financial incentives like the Centertown Heritage Facade Improvement Program, our Heritage Community Improvement Plan, as well as the cost sharing stream of our Heritage Property Grant Program. And then proactive enforcement. I think this, has helped stabilize several at-risk buildings recently. It's still not perfect by any stretch. So what are the challenges? And I think, this is really where the rubber hits the road, because unfortunately, I think there remain more challenges than benefits at this point. The enforcement process is very long. It's resource intensive. There are opportunities for appeals. Those appeals can be granted with lengthy timelines, and really the city becomes in a position whereby it becomes very hard to make things move quickly. And as we know, time is of the essence with these properties. We have many unwilling and unresponsive property owners, to be quite frank. Diplomatic and foreign-owned properties can be a challenge. As you see here on the bottom of the screen, we have 46 Cartier Street. That's an individually designated building. This building is owned by the government of Syria, has been vacant for many years. And because of the political situation there, it has become very challenging to even have anybody to talk to about the property. And then we have the logistics and challenges of contracting out repair work. It is very, again, labor intensive for city staff to undertake. And I think at the end of the day, it's the inability to compel an owner to either redevelop their property or sell it. So in conclusion, I think, some things that we're working on, we're trying to build relationships with property owners, and trying to sort of eat the elephant one bite at a time. We recognize the system needs to continue to evolve. We're still exploring other possible incentives and disincentives. We had a really great public workshop last year with members of the heritage community where we looked at other ideas. We are still exploring those ideas and trying to figure out if there's some other things that we could be implementing. We're working closely with our colleagues at Global Affairs Canada to try to build better relationships with some of those foreign-owned properties. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we're looking to refresh the Heritage Watchlist website to see what else we can provide in terms of transparency for the neighbors, transparency for the heritage community to understand the efforts that the city is undertaking, even though perhaps it doesn't always look like it. And so as an ending note, I think the city's goal is to prevent future instances of demolition by neglect in our heritage neighborhoods through proactive enforcement, engagement with property owners, education about the contributions of heritage properties to the story of our city, and through the efforts of people like you on this call who are interested in this topic and who are impacted on a daily basis. So I'm always available. If you have something you want to talk about, feel free to reach out directly to me. First name dot last name at ottawa.ca, or it's even easier to remember, heritage@ottawa.ca. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jack Hanna from the CCA, who's going to talk about the community impacts in Centertown. Over to you, Jack.
Thank you very much, Lesley. Let's start off talking about the poster child for demolition by neglect, Somerset House. It of course is at the corner of Bank and Somerset. This is what it looked like back in the day. It's been a whole lot of things. A department store, famous pub. It was built in 1898. So 2004, Tony Sharasebi bought it. He has brought forward a small handful of proposals for redevelopment. None of them have proceeded. We're told that the permits to proceed with development are ready to go at City Hall. Here's what it looks like today. This lower image is the back of the building. There was structural damage back there, and the back half had to be demolished. Here's the current proposal. But is work proceeding? Not that I've seen. I think in some cases, many cases of demolition by neglect, there are some hard negotiations and hard decisions. I mean, you have a fundamental disagreement. An owner wants to demolish. He will not invest in heritage or he doesn't have the money. The city wants to conserve. And the community, the city acting as its representative, has to decide what heritage attributes to save and what can be demolished. And with that, let's go to 330 Gilmore, the former Ottawa Board of Education headquarters. That's this building that you see right here. It is just to the west of Elgin and is between Lewis and Gilmore. It was built in, pardon me, the oldest portion was built in 1922. There were additions in 1956 and 1963. Ashcroft, which is owned by David Chu, purchased it in 2001. The next year, Ashcroft proposed a 20-story apartment building. The city disagreed and okayed a 15-story building. It was never built. In 2008, Ashcroft proposed a 9-story seniors residence. This is the seniors residence. Here's the old OBE headquarters building. That too did not proceed. As you can see, this site is close to, on the very edge of the high-rise district downtown. It is still in the low-rise, mid-rise district. The city has made it clear in past applications and in comments made recently that they're proposed to let part of this building go. They're proposed to let the two additions that were put on later go. And what they really want to keep is the original, they really want to keep the 1922 portion, which is lovely. It looks like this. Everybody who talks about the future development of this building assumes that this wing will be retained. This is a diagram drawn up by an architect who was talking about this site. And, he assumes that the existing heritage building, pardon me, the westernmost wing, the most beautiful part of it, will be retained. But not everybody shares that view. The owner, we met with David Chu, some representatives of the Centertown Community Association a couple of years ago, just before we learned he was going bankrupt. And his vision was to build towers here, 3 of them, and to take only the facade. That is the single face of the nicest part, the oldest part, and stick the facade on one of his towers. That was his vision of the future of this site. Now, Ashcroft is in bankruptcy. This site has been put up for sale, just like a couple of weeks ago, it was put up for sale. The asking price is $25 million. I'll have a little bit more to say about this site a little later. I want to jump over to the corner of Elgin and Lewis. Here we're talking about, this is what the church used to look like, St. Mark's, before the tower came down. This is a very prominent site. It's across the street from Minto Park. It's on Elgin. It was a really nice feature of Elgin Street. Here's what it looks like today. The tower was in bad shape and had to come down. This church goes back quite a ways, by the way, to 1900. The congregation that was there is no longer there. They've moved to a new site. As Lesley mentioned, the city has done repairs, you can see them right here, to try and keep what is left stable. And I am informed that the city has an agreement with the current owner that when this site is sold, whomever buys it will have to rebuild the tower. But how much more of it are they going to retain? I would say the tower, which is the foremost architectural heritage feature of this site, is no longer there. Yes, it can be rebuilt, but how much of the rest of the building should be retained? That's going to be an interesting negotiation with whomever proposes to buy this site. Now, Lesley talked about what the city can do. I want to speak briefly about what a resident can do. Well, mostly you can bother the city. You can pressure the city to enforce the bylaws that Lesley mentioned, to retain the structural elements of a building and to keep the building safe. And you do that by phoning bylaw or emailing bylaw. For the old OBE building, 330 Gilmore, someone who's a prominent member of the CCA, his hobby is that site. And I think he has put something like 20 to 30 bylaw complaints against that site in the past couple of years. That individual has also worked the city's access to information site, and he learned an awful lot of interesting things about 330 Gilmore. Now, you can find out about tax arrears. That is, has the owner not been paying his taxes, which is the case, by the way, with 330 Gilmore. You can also get access to some communications between the city and the owner. So you can get some idea of of the state of play. What's the owner telling the city? Are there any agreements in place? Are there any plans that have been discussed? 330 Gilmore, because of access to information requests, this is the old OBE headquarters. We know that as of the end of 2024, Ashcroft was in arrears on taxes to the tune of $250,000. That's not much. That's pocket change for a building of, for a site this large. The city was in the process of, and started the legal process of informing Ashcroft that it could put the building up for sale for tax arrears. And the owner himself placed up for sale January 27th, 2026. I want to talk about one little solution to demolition by neglect. You can avoid it. And of course, to avoid demolition by neglect, you need to have a willing owner. This is Knox Presbyterian Church at the corner of Lisgar and Elgin. It is a very prominent site. You can see the church's tower almost from Parliament Hill, from like 6 or 7 blocks away. It's across from the Human Rights Memorial and the old normal school, City Hall, and it's well known on Elgin. Last summer, the church hired masons to repoint 1/4 of the tower. And that scaffolding was up all summer long, and masons were working on all summer. The job cost about $130,000 to do 1/4 of the tower. The city made a grant, a heritage grant of $60,000. And that was much appreciated. I want to talk about what that grant meant. But first of all, let me put the 60,000 in context. The job on the tower, 1/4 of the tower, was $130,000. The same year, last year, Knox replaced a portion of its steam heating system, the pipes and pumps in the basement only. That was another $90,000. This year, they plan to replace the roof, and the estimates they're getting are coming in a little under $200,000. Knox has 2 attributes that make it expensive to keep the building up. A, it's old, and B, it's big. So last year and this year, if they proceed with the roof, which they hope to do, they will spend about $400,000 on upkeep. That's serious coin for this congregation. This congregation typically gets about 70 people in the pews on a Sunday, with more online watching the service. It's a dual service. They also have a fairly active business renting out their spaces. The church serves a lot of functions in the community. There's its out of the cold dinner for anybody who needs a free meal on Saturdays. They get 140, 150 people of that each Saturday. It's a major entertainment venue, and of course, it houses a healthy congregation. Now, so $400,000 over 2 years, and more 3-figure repairs in sight. As I say, that's serious money for Knox, but the city put in $60,000, and that sends a message. It says that we appreciate what you're doing. The community, acting through its city government, appreciates what you're doing and stands with you. And Knox, by the way, is that the monies that they're spending are not Band-Aid solutions. They're making the kind of investments you make if you expect this church to still be there in 50 years. They're making long-term investments. So the kind of owner you want. But I think it's important that the city stood with them and showed their support. It certainly gladdens my heart. And that's it for me. I will turn over to the next speaker.
Hi, everybody. I'm Heather Mitchell with the Westboro Community Association. This is the story of the Elms, or the Sœurs de la Visitation Convent at 114 Richmond Road. So this is two buildings, one history. A lot of people who know this building probably just call it the convent. But I like to include and call it the Elms because it is indeed two buildings that were married together by the nuns. So if we look on the left side of your screen, the winter scene is how the convent looks now. And in the other summer scene is how the convent probably looked at the time when it was designated. So timeline. So this fabulous building is in the core of Westboro, and it's been hidden for a very long time. So it started, the Elms was a villa for the first owner, who was George Eaton. It was built by James Dyke in a Gothic revival style with all those wonderful pitched gables and so on. The first owner was George Eaton, and then later John Skeed. And John, Senator Skeed, as you see there on your screen, is considered pretty much the founder of Westboro. He was a lumberman. He was set up a mill. He basically opened up Westboro. And he sold it to John Holland, who was a newspaperman. He published at one point the Ottawa Citizen. He was a cinema pioneer. I believe some sort of first version of movies were shown here in Ottawa. But all these people and the lands around the Elms were aspiring gentry and entrepreneurs who prospered as Ottawa was elevated into be the capital at 1857. So you had all the by-town lumber, but then Ottawa started to grow and it started to attract a more middle class and upper middle class people who wanted more space, and they didn't want to be downtown. They wanted to be in Nepean. So this beautiful villa, the Elms, was built, but in 1909, it was purchased from John Holland by the Sœurs de la Visitation, which is a cloistered order founded in France in 1610. The nuns built 4 wings, a chapel, living space, refectory, works rooms, and a huge, huge lawn. That picture, the colored picture you can see there, I put a circle around the Elms. That's the original building. And then you can see all the beautiful work that the nuns built, including the chapel, which is in the lower bottom part of the photograph. And you can see they had this beautiful lawn that they walked around. The monastery itself was a classic example of European and North American monasteries that were, and I'm poaching from the heritage designation that the city prepared, that were closed to the world but open to the sky. And you can see that. And closed it certainly was. A stone fence was erected after the nuns moved in, and although the services were offered over the years at the chapel for the community, the Elms would not be seen again for almost 100 years. So as you can see, in 2009, it was designated a heritage building. In 2009, the Elms, at the same time, roughly the same year, sold the building to Ashcroft Developments. In 2010, the nuns left. And in 2015, Ashcroft started building Q West, which is at 88 Richmond Road. So the stone wall was removed, and we all got a chance to see the beautiful buildings. But it was replaced with a 10-story condo built on Richmond Road, which completely blocked the view of the Elms and the convent, except through a few small arches. You can see that small arch on the left. And then you can see how the building looks like with the condos next to it. Ashcroft did create public access through the Nuns Walk. They called it the Nun Walk, a lovely path through the property that connects Byron to Richmond Road. Over the years, Ashcroft came up with options for the elms in the convent and the large lawn, but these were never realized. The building has been derelict ever since, so that's 16 years. So to complete our timeline, in 2024, Ashcroft, as you heard from Jack, went into receivership, and that was for, I think, all of their properties. So the elms in the convent were put up for sale. And today the heritage property and lawn has been sold, but no announcement has been made as to who the buyer is and what the plans are for this beautiful heritage property. So what you're seeing here is the Nuns Walk, the little sign, and that is sunset on the beautiful lawn that is in the back right now. The community uses it for walking around, and lots of dogs use it as exercise. So this is what it looks like today. This is work done by the city, by our councillor. I'm going to talk more about that later. But you can see there's a lot of work has been gone into trying to preserve and prevent deterioration. No trespassing. So this is the elms portion of the convent right here. What the future holds. Well, first, before I talk about the convent, I'm going to talk about some successful buildings in Westboro. Probably, if you've been out in our neck of the woods, you would have found out about them or even engaged with them. This is an image of a successful renovation of a heritage building in our neighborhood. It's the old Nepean Town Hall, built in 1896. It was renovated 100 years later into the Churchill Senior Center, and today it's a busy, thriving place that capitalizes on its heritage, but it provides a deeply needed current service to the community. It shows us that heritage buildings can be useful and prosperous. And I don't have a picture up, but you all know the Keg Manor. I'm sure many of you have eaten there. That property is owned by the NCC. It's a heritage building that was turned into a successful restaurant and heritage garden, Maple Lawn. That's a tremendous asset to the community. And we have other buildings, for example, again, I don't have a picture up, but we have Cobblestone House on Cole Avenue, which is a private home and got heritage designation, and the owners take great pride in taking care of that home. So what about the convent? So what about the elms? This pre-Confederation, early 20th century building has sat empty and neglected for 16 years, as I mentioned, but certainly not forgotten. The efforts have been taken to protect it from irreparable harm. And as I mentioned, the councillor got involved, community associations and neighbors, and all of those in the heritage community who have helped try to prevent the deterioration as much as possible. And our heritage staff have just done a tremendous job trying to keep this building from harm. We've also learned recently that Canada's Heritage Trust has a watch on this building. I don't quite know what that means, and maybe Lesley can talk about that later. City Council was told the new owner, that we don't know yet and we haven't met, has engaged an engineer to check the condition of the building and is working with city heritage planning staff. We sincerely hope the new owner will engage with the community so the building will not be hidden away again, as it were, but include a public component to whatever renovation occurs. For example, a restaurant, a coffee shop, some sort of public space that would include interpretive panels or some sort of plaque. This would be important to us in the community. People should still be able to walk around the property and enjoy the beauty of those gables and the chapel and cherish this important part of our Westboro heritage. It's a legacy that we hope to pass on to future generations. So we sincerely hope that city staff will make sure that our own new owner has some sensitivity towards that. We don't want it to go back behind a wall for another 100 years. Heritage Ottawa, demolition by neglect. This is why we're all here. We have a committee with Heritage Ottawa. I think one of the things that might have helped with some of these buildings is ensuring that lights, heating, and cooling be retained, along with frequent inspections. I know we already have those, but some buildings might need more. We all know that some owners of vacant buildings allow deterioration to the point where the demolition is the only option, and we must have tools to prevent this from happening. There's also, just sharing with what Lesley said, I mean, there's an overall mindset that heritage buildings are somehow a problem rather than an opportunity. And we see this with owners of both large commercial buildings and private single-family homes. It's a terrible shame that Ottawans see the conservation of their built heritage as expensive, inconvenient, and restrictive, or some sort of an obstruction to the city's policy on intensification. And, I jumped on Lesley one day I didn't mean to, but I said, oh, we're doing such a terrible job at protecting our heritage. I was not directing that comment actually to our heritage staff, who obviously feel very strongly that it's important. What I was referring to is as Lesley has put, sometimes our owners are not as sensitive as we would like them to be. Sometimes individual homeowners, if you're working with trying to get a heritage conservation district going, people are worried that they won't be able to renovate their house. They're against, it makes them uncomfortable that their house gets a heritage designation. They worry that they won't be able to make renovations or do things the way they see fit. They feel they'll lose some freedom. And this is a big thing that I think an issue that we have to address. We have to do more on education. Heritage conservation can be profitable, useful, and worthwhile. And just to put that quote, which is from that Ottawa Citizen article that was in the newspaper today from Don Mikkel, heritage conservation isn't just about landmarks, it's about how communities evolve, how neighborhoods remain livable, connected, and aesthetically coherent, rather than dominated by traffic and density at all costs. A little final postscript. This is what WCA is doing. First of all, we're coping with a loss. We had a designated building, the one on your left. It's 501 Cole Avenue. We had a designation for this building. We worked very hard on it. We got a lot of support. We had a huge setback. We spearheaded the designation for this, which is a former church manse. The owner went to the Ontario Land Tribunal twice and had the bylaw overturned the second time. So we have the distinction of being the only time in Ottawa's history that a property has lost designation as a result of action by the owner. However, we're continuing on. Our Heritage Committee will continue to work on obtaining heritage designations for some other worthy buildings. These are the ones that are on our list. Ogilvie House, where the owner of Ogilvie Department Store lived. Nepean High School. Westboro Manor on Churchill. It may be the oldest house in Westboro. And there's a handful of John Cole homes on Highland Park, which are being knocked down one by one. We'd like to work with heritage staff to see what we can do to preserve some, if not all, of the remaining buildings. We've got volunteers standing by to start these applications, and any support you can give us or help with this, we would always appreciate it. Thanks so much for your attention.
Good evening. I will now do my screen share. Heritage Ottawa has had a long history with demolition by neglect. I'm going to give you a few examples from our struggles over the years. I'm going to do the same as Jack. Our Lady School, which Lesley also already mentioned, is certainly one of our poster child. It was the first thing I encountered, I guess, as a member of the Heritage Ottawa board. A very sad story, only 2 walls left after many years of struggle with the owner. We have the more recent example of the McGee House, which Lesley also mentioned. The west wall collapsed in 2018, and in 2019, which is shown here in the photo, the city undertook the stabilization work in order to protect the public. No further work has been done since that stabilization, and the residents fear that further collapse is inevitable. My third example, however, gives us hope. The city registry office at 17 Nicholas was sold by the city to the federal government in 1935, leased and occupied by various people until about 1980. It was designated in 1978. Heritage Ottawa spent a great deal of energy researching the vacant building's history and condition, produced media handouts, staffed it during doors open when they could get permission from the owner. The building is now part of an expansion of the Rideau Centre, and the building has survived 2 moves in order to permit construction of underground parking below it. It's undergoing restoration at this time, and the new residential building I saw yesterday is now being marketed as the Rideau Registry. If you want to move in, you should save your money. It appears to be a luxury building. So what has Heritage Ottawa done? As early as 2007, Heritage Ottawa lobbied for better coordination of bylaw and regulatory services to monitor the state of heritage buildings. Frequent presentations and letters from the indomitable David Fleming demanding better protection for heritage buildings finally got some results. The Property Standards Bylaw, which was amended in 2013, as Lesley described it, there is a new Part 6 with special standards for Part 4 and Part 5 heritage properties. And they are now being used to good effect to monitor and to enforce better property standards. And the Mayor's Heritage Matters Task Force, I believe this was a result also of lobbying by Heritage Ottawa and convincing the then Mayor, Jim Watson, that he had to do something. It was established as a result of Somerset House demolition by neglect, and it was basically there was a problem with a collapse during a construction project. The Heritage Watch List is also one of the outcomes of the Heritage Matters Task Force, and Leslie has described how that works. The Heritage Community Improvement Plan, I believe, was another outcome of the Mayor's Heritage Matters Task Force. It was a result of some investigations that were being done by staff into what other communities were doing, and it was the answer, I think, to the request for a heritage property tax rebate, which is in effect in some communities. What can heritage communities and advocates do? Awareness raising, I think, is one of the important things that we can do to assist with the explaining the importance of our heritage and our built heritage. And I have to tell you, Ottawa communities have used a great variety of methods to raise awareness about the importance of heritage and explain what it means to own a heritage property or to live in a heritage conservation district. I'll give you some examples that I'm aware of different communities and the things that they have done. New Edinburgh developed a welcome package some years ago, I'm not sure if they're still doing it, explaining to new owners that they live in a heritage conservation district, what the district designation means, and offering further information and advice. And more recently, they've developed a self-guided walking tour, which I have pictured here. The Glebe Community Association, they have established a series of heritage plaques, usually displayed during the Great Glebe Garage Sale. They invite homeowners and residents to celebrate the architecture and social history of the neighborhood by displaying a temporary plaque identifying the history and architecture of their home. They ask for basic architectural style, along with something on the builder, architect, and historical occupants. In 2017, I learned the committee prepared temporary plaques for all 160 houses in the Phase 2 Clemo Estate Heritage Conservation District study area with the information they had accumulated. And Lowertown, I'm sorry, I don't have a for sale sign in Lowertown, but their contribution is quite interesting. Lowertown has, I think, suffered more than almost any other community from demolition by neglect. Maybe because they're one of the oldest communities. Their initiative was to ensure that realtors and buyers are fully informed about the significance, requirements, and benefits of owning heritage properties. And Curtis Wolf, one of their members, wrote a very interesting article in the Heritage Ottawa newsletter, November 2024, which I commend to you. The package they created contains a letter to realtors asking them to acknowledge the heritage status of a property, a welcome letter to purchasers, encouraging them to help conserve Ottawa's built heritage, and a frequently asked questions flyer that demystifies topics such as HCDs, when heritage permits are required, and provides information about the city's Heritage Property Grant Program for building restoration. City heritage staff have worked with them, and they actually co-sign the letters that are sent to new residents. And I realized while I was thinking about this or going over this today, there's a couple of others I should tell you about. Civic Hospital Neighborhood Association has developed a history pin project. It's and I'm sorry, I don't have the I don't have the link, but if somebody is interested and you can't find it on your own, you can you can send messages to info@heritageottawa.org. And another recent development, or fairly recent, is collaboration with students of the Carleton students usually, and specifically the students at the Israeli School of Architecture. Civic Hospital neighborhood has just done a project, and there have been others. So there are advantages to using students, getting them a project to help you with your heritage research. They do excellent work. So we have carrots and we have sticks. The carrots generally are provided by the city, and these include the grants. There's more dollars and more categories available as matching grants. There's the Ottawa Heritage Awards. This is a program which you can participate in by nominating buildings, projects that you feel have done an excellent job of restoring buildings or adaptive reuse of buildings. And there is the new facade improvement program pilot for Bank Street in Centertown, which Lesley also mentioned. And the sticks. Most of the communities, I think, can wield the sticks that the city makes available and engage the city staff to do so too. These include the vacant residential unit tax, started in 2022. It includes all properties, not only heritage. And it encourages owners to maintain, occupy, or rent their property. The vacant property bylaw, also established in 2022, requires owners to obtain an annual permit every year until an occupancy permit is granted under the Ontario Building Code. The fee is not enormous, but they are also required to do a number of other things, including maintaining insurance for liability insurance, $2 million, secure any buildings and property from unauthorized entry, post a sign with contact information. This is important because if you see a vacant property without a sign with contact information, report it. If the contact information is there, you can contact the owner or the agent who's working for the owner and let them know how concerned you are. It doesn't hurt. Also, be sure to report vacant buildings and properties to heritage staff because you are the eyes of your neighborhood. They don't have time to go around looking for empty or for vacant buildings or problem buildings that are not already on the watch list. So they may be unaware of some of the buildings that you have concerns about. Call 311 whenever you notice something that worries you or a change in the fabric of the building. Failure to board up vacant buildings is a real risk. In my experience, these calls get a fairly quick response or a quick response from bylaw or property standards if they're on the watch list. What more do we need? I think we need more political will to use the tools that are available. We need direction to staff by the Built Heritage Committee and Council to enforce more strictly and to research alternatives to current practices. It's very easy to just keep going along. And in some cases, I don't think there is political will to for the staff to do more than they're already doing. They're pushing the envelope in some cases. We need to get behind them and to push our politicians to be more proactive. And I want to end on this note. Elections are coming. Can we make demolition by neglect an issue in the upcoming election? Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. And I am going to ask all the speakers to turn on your cameras now. Good, they're doing that. So thanks, everybody, for these excellent presentations. I won't take up a lot of time thanking you, but I'm sure at one point there were 125 people in the audience, and I'm sure that they all appreciated all four of these talks. So we have some questions already in the queue, but I'm inviting other people to put using the Q&A function at the bottom. As Catherine already mentioned at the beginning, for those of you who were there all the way at the beginning, we are going to use the Q&A, not the chat function for this. And it should be at the bottom of your screen, and I'm going to moderate the questions and combine ones that are similar. So you can put them in there. We already have some that have appeared during the talks. Okay, so I guess the first one was a very simple one, which feeds right into what Linda was saying, which is why are there not fines for commercial owners that purchase buildings intending to neglect them? Um, so that's probably aimed at Lesley Collins, but everybody can answer that. So just unmute yourselves when you want to talk. I'm not going to call on anybody. There's only 4 of you, so.
Thanks, Jay. I can start, and then if my colleagues here have anything to add, of course. I think the problem is that we don't often know. Well, we generally don't know when it's purchased that the goal is neglect, and it may not be the neglect. It may not be purchased as a property to neglect. These things happen over a very long period of time. I mean, I think the stories that you've heard today, in terms of the examples, these are not things that happened overnight. And so, I mean, I think as far as fines go, we do have the ability to. There are some inspection fees and fines that can be levied as part of the enforcement process, but just sort of fines, they have to be related to something specific, and it can't just be you're a neglectful property owner, unfortunately.
Any of the other panelists wish to weigh in on this question? Okay, so I think Lesley has covered that. So the next question is a specific one about a property. So these are 2 houses that are that were built, they say around 1850 on St. Patrick's, that are rotting away. Both are built from logs. You can see them as someone is ripping off the siding. And is there anything that can be done? Who wants to handle this one? Or should I call on somebody? Lesley?
It's okay. I mean, I think to Jack's point and to Linda's point, you can always call 311 to make a complaint. You can also email us at heritage@ottawa.ca. The specific address would be needed to specifically. And I wouldn't be able to provide an answer tonight, but if you'd like to follow up with us, I would suggest calling or emailing 301 or emailing heritage@ottawa.ca.
Yeah, I'll just say, Jay, we had with our coal building, the owner bought the building. The building was designated at around the same time it was designated before the owner purchased it. So the owner knew that it was a designated building. But plans were presented to tear down the building and put something else up. Not a big high rise, but plans were to get rid of the building. And that was prevented because we've had the community, the neighbors around that building have had a terrible time because there were renters in there who didn't take care, and then they left, and there's just been nobody in the building, and it's everything, grass growing, snow not being, just awful, and the neighbors have had to call 311 a lot over that building, and the city has tried as much as possible to try to keep it in line. So I mean, it works in terms of trying to keep it in line, but we know there's also sometimes in some empty buildings you get squatters and so on, and it's very difficult. It's very difficult.
Yeah, thank you. So here's one, I think that it's for Jack, or at least he should take the first crack at it, which is, does the Centertown blanket heritage designation, by which I think they mean the Centertown heritage districts, provide any grants for upkeep to homeowners whose houses do not have a historical plaque?
Yes, they do, but I'm not the expert on the grants. I'm afraid it's back to you, Lesley.
Oh, is it back to Lesley? Okay.
Jack is correct. Yes. So depending on what category your property is, you could be eligible for the Heritage Property Grant Program. If the person who's inquiring would like to know more, you can just Google Ottawa Heritage Property Grant Program. You should find it. provides a cost-sharing grant of up to 50%. Unfortunately, applications are closed for 2026, but they open again in the fall for work to be completed in 2027.
Anybody else have a comment before I move on to another question?
Yeah, Lesley, how much can a homeowner get under that program?
For a small, for like a house, $10,000.
And that's each year, yes?
For 2 years.
Every 2 years. Okay. Okay. We're getting some more questions here, which is good. Well, here's another specific question. I don't know if somebody knows, but there's a whole block of boarded up buildings on the east side of Bank Street. Does anyone know what's happening there?
Smart living is what's happening there. The developer bought all the properties. I think some of the tenants are still struggling to stay. He has been given, I think he has approval for the new development. He was to preserve a certain amount of the facade, more than the facade. It was a little deeper than that. But Smart Living has been having some financial difficulties too. So I don't know whether some of their properties are bankrupt. I don't know whether that particular one, because they incorporate each property under a separate incorporation, which tends to not to let them all fall together. But that's all I know. I don't know whether Lesley knows anything more about it than that.
Could either
It's
you or
very
Leslie
sad.
say where on Bank Street this
Yes,
is?
it's between Nepean and I can't remember. Do you know, Lesley?
Yeah. The corner of Nepean, or sorry, the corner of Bank and Lisgar, I think, is what's being talked about.
But it is a whole, I wait for the bus across from there. So I get a chance to look at it. It's very sad.
Yeah, and many very sad examples in the city, unfortunately. Let's see what we have here. Oh, here's somebody. 24 Sussex. Is there any hope? That's the Prime Minister's residence. Who wants to go on that?
Oh,
Not me.
sorry,
Linda, maybe as
in the
Heritage Ottawa.
wrong audio and video.
Yeah.
Well, Heritage Ottawa hasn't totally given up on it. We write to the powers that be from time to time. We get questioned by the press as to what's happening, and of course we don't know. I think the last we heard was everybody, the NCC is working with Public Works, and they're going to come up with something, but they haven't made a decision. And I don't know whether I guess they will eventually have to make a decision, because and they are taking good care of it, I believe. They took out all the hazardous substances, and I think it's stabilized and heated, and it's surviving. But it's one of those things. No one can do anything about it except the decision makers, the politicians in power. And we don't have a lot of power with them. I wasn't suggesting that we we don't have an election, I don't think, coming up at the federal level. I'm talking about the municipal level. I think we'd have to concentrate on that. But Heritage Ottawa tries.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm just looking at that. Remind people that if they want to ask questions, there are maybe 5 in the queue, 4 in the queue. To pop them in there, we'll go, if we need to around 8:30, when we'll have to wrap this up, but we have time for a few more questions before then. Other than calling 311 or emailing heritage@ottawa.ca, what more can residents do to support city staff, and what legal changes, do the city staff need to have stronger enforcement and prevent demolition by neglect? They're wondering whether letters to politicians or raising this politically would be useful.
I think I will stay away from the letters to politicians piece, but I would invite one of my community colleagues who are more on the advocacy side to speak to that. I think right now, I think we have a pretty good toolbox of tools. it's just, you know, at the end of the day, these are generally privately owned properties. And that is the difficulty, because there is a certain amount of autonomy that a private property owner gets. And, you know, we can enforce a minimum standard, but the city can't go in and, you know, restore a building back to its former glory under the auspices of property standards. So I think we have the tools. I think it's about, I think from my perspective, some of it is about managing expectations of what the tools can do and what is possible within, you know, while respecting people's property rights. But then also sort of the idea that we really, I think, need to build relationships with these property owners and try to sell the idea that heritage is, as Heather said, an opportunity and not just a burden. And that's the perspective that we've been really trying to take. But I'd invite my panel colleagues to speak to the advocacy piece.
Yeah, I agree, Lesley. I just find it's because when we travel, you know, people who travel, you see heritage protected in other areas of Canada, or there seems to be something about, well, you heard the same builder mentioned twice in two projects here, not to dump on that particular builder, but you know, it's just there seems to be an attitude that is just a problem, and that's owners large and small. And I don't understand where that, I really don't understand. Anyone who travels knows that there are many countries in the world that seem to value their heritage, and it's not it doesn't seem to be like, oh, it's got to be a museum and we have to preserve it and we have to, you know, take little brushes and use white gloves to polish up the front door. No, it's a lot of these buildings, they're used and they're maintained and they're renovated into banks and, you know, theaters and community spaces and, you know, into all kinds of things. And it just seems to be that some of our larger owners who go after some of these properties, they don't seem to think that way. They think differently. They seem to feel that the property is in the way and they have to just knock it down, or at the very most they'll do some, what is the word for that, Lesley? Facadism? Like destroy the building, but just keep the bricks on the outside or something. Which, I mean, at some point you sometimes say to yourself, well, at least I'll take that. But to me, that's an absolute last resort. So I think it's an attitude, and I don't know how to change it, but you know, Linda's talked about education, and if communities care about it as well, then maybe the larger owners will start to care about it.
That's a good segue into a related question that's come in, which cites having other cities in the UK and Europe and even the United States where there seems to be more power to protect heritage and more funding. And they want to know why the funding envelope for heritage preservation grants and heritage-related incentives and support is so small for the City of Ottawa.
Well, I think what I'd say is the program has grown significantly over the last 5 years. We have managed to more than double the annual budget for the Heritage Grant Program. We have increased the amount of money that larger buildings can get. So the property that Jack talked about, Knox Presbyterian, we have a cost sharing grant stream that property owners who are registered charities or not-for-profits can get up to 75% of the cost covered of their project, up to $75,000 from the city. And then we also have a heritage tax incentive program, which we haven't really had a lot of uptake on, but it offers a tax increment grant of up to $500,000 if you are redeveloping a heritage property to include new housing units. So, you know, there are incentives available. We are working to continue to build those. I think we also, you know, the Centertown Heritage Facade Improvement Grant, that's a bucket of money of $400,000 alone, just for Bank Street and Somerset Village. So we're working on it. The programs are always oversubscribed. So, you know, I mean, municipal budgets are municipal budgets.
So
that's where the election comes in. If we can convince more people who are running for office that Heritage in Ottawa needs more money, that we're doing an excellent job with the money we have, but we do have to get more. We have the programs, but if there was more dollars attached, you could obviously offer grants to more deserving homeowners and property owners, because we keep designating. I mean, that's another thing that worries us. We're designating buildings at quite a considerable rate due to our friend Doug Ford. And that means there are more buildings that become eligible for grants, competing for grants. And we are. I mean, I was quite surprised. I checked on the amount of grants because I knew that they've been increasing, but I wasn't aware that it was double what it used to be. Done that very quietly, without raising too much, without raising the ire of anyone who might be opposed, which is why we, I think, as the public, need to say to our politicians, this is important. We want you to do this so that the staff, have some backing, and politicians can come in and say, what? It's only this? We should be doubling that. Again, I don't know if it'll work, but it's worth a try.
So I'm going to move on to, let's highlight one of the successes in heritage conservation, which is the cottage-style service station at the corner of Island Park and Richmond Road. I think this is probably for you, Heather. They want to know what is that building going to be? What's the final design for that building once the condos are built?
I can't speak to the final development of the commercial property, but for those who don't know, there was a gas station that was owned by, I think it's the Trudeau family, Justin Trudeau's grandfather, I think. Something like that. He owned a chain of gas stations, and it was quite this charming. They called them cottage gas stations. And it's at the corner of Island Park and Richmond Road, and it was there for a very long time. And then the Island Park Community Association worked very, very hard to get it designated as a heritage property, and that was achieved. And since then, the project has come in, which is, for those who don't, it's going to be like a 12-story building, but the owner has decided to incorporate the heritage building, but the heritage building is right on the property. So what they've done and what they agreed to do was they've removed the heritage building and put it across the street, which is where it sits at the moment, this little cottagey affair, and it will be incorporated. I think it will face the Richmond Road, and it will be kind of, as far as I know, it's going to be, it will either be a coffee shop or the entrance to the building somehow. So the whole structure of the little cottage gas station will be retained. Surprisingly, we found out that, because at that time I was on the board, my husband Duff Mitchell, and there was several board members who worked on this. They found out that there is in fact a group of people around the world that are interested in heritage gas stations, and they connected in order to get the heritage research on this. Our intrepid board members connected with these society. There may be one in Australia, and boy, did they ever go to work, and they figured it out, and we got all the information we needed. So I don't know the ultimate answer to that, but the building will be brought back and integrated into the large building that's going up right at the corner there.
Jeff Leeper, the city councilor, has a video of that building being moved across the street.
They use one of those slow, moving
very
things.
slow. He speeded it up, though. It's not real time. Lesley, you could probably answer what the final use is going to be.
Yeah, I think it is going to be a commercial use.
Yeah.
So like say like a coffee shop or something like that. And I would just add that this project also is a recipient of, or will be a recipient of the tax grant program that I was just speaking about. So they're eligible for up to $500,000 of the cost of the money that they invest in the building as part of their redevelopment, and that comes back as a tax rebate after the fact. So we are having some success with that program, and I think this is a good one. That building might still be on the watch list because technically still vacant, but it's one that we're pretty happy about, that one and the registry office that Linda talked about.
Like I think what's happened there with the city working together with the developer is just so fantastic. Like I think it's really it is a great success story. I didn't realize they got the tax. Is that something that we can do more to make these larger commercial developers aware of when they start going near heritage buildings?
I mean, it's something that city staff do, certainly.
Mhm.
We do, when we have that first meeting, when somebody comes to the city and says we're proposing a development, and it sometimes can be used as a way to incentivize doing the right thing.
Someone has provided information in the chat here. 70 Richmond Road, first of all, they say it's credited to Heather Mitchell, and local historian artist Andrew King, whose painting is right behind, one of his paintings is right behind Heather Mitchell. So congratulations. Also says that the gas station was, Emile Trudeau was on the board of the directors of Champlain Oil, and the gas station was the first in the city to serve gasoline with a pump. Used to be poured from the cans into
Yes,
car.
I'm going to say that the person who did a lot of the research was a gentleman named Paul Forster at the time. I don't know if he's on this call, but even if he's not, he deserves to be congratulated.
And I wrote the designation report, so it was a group effort.
There you go. It's almost 8:30. So I should say, if there are additional questions or questions that you posted which did not get answered because we ran out of time, they can go to Heritage Ottawa at info@heritageottawa.org, and they'll be shared with the speakers, and maybe we'll get some more additional answers in writing. Before we end this, I want to remind everybody that Heritage Ottawa is going to present its second online auction between March 8 and 14 of this year. Everyone's invited to bid on a wide variety of items. It will include tickets and experiences from places like the Stratford Festival, hotel stays, restaurant meals, and spa days. As a special celebration of Ottawa's bicentennial in March, Heritage Ottawa will present 2 online lectures. March 18th, Queen's University Professor David Gordon will present an at times irreverent lecture on Ottawa's development from frontier town to national capital. Then the following week, on 25th March, renowned Ottawa architect and advocate for great architecture, Tone Dreesen, will look at Ottawa today and perhaps at what the city can expect architecturally into the future. And he's a real expert on that. Please join us for both of these events. The events will be free and they're open to all, but please register like you did for this one via our website at heritageottawa.org. And finally, as mentioned at the beginning, Heritage Ottawa lectures are provided free of charge. We encourage you to join Heritage Ottawa if you're not yet a member, and to donate to the organization to help continue efforts to share heritage stories like we did tonight. Information is available on the Heritage Ottawa website. And with that, I'm going to thank you for joining us, and good night, and we will end this now.